Welcome to the Nanovation Podcast. Information about this and other episodes can be found at fillerlab.com/nanovation. If you like what you hear, be sure to tell a friend or leave a review at Apple Podcasts. It really does help. I welcome your thoughts and suggestions. You can contact me on Twitter at Michael Filler or via email at nanovationpodcast@gmail.com.
What is the library's role in curating journal articles? Because somebody else funds it, somebody else writes it, someone else puts it online. Under the old system, the library,
Right.
had to gather all that information together and make it available so that anyone on campus could use it.
Right.
But if the library is not part of that, triangle,
Right.
then it's just out there in the internet. What's our role?
That's Fred Rascoe from Georgia Tech, talking about the changing roles of libraries and scholarly publishing in the 21st century. On this episode of Nanovation, Fred returns to chat about the latest happenings in this world, especially with regards to open access and peer review. We discuss why scholarly publishing has been so resistant to and really insulated from change in the internet era. We bat around ideas for business models that do not involve universities, companies, or the public paying for expensive journal subscriptions. I also make the argument that peer review is not all it's cracked up to be, and Fred puts me in the hot seat, asking about my own publishing practices. But before we get to the show, I wanted to draw your attention to a recent interview with Melinda Baldwin, the books editor at Physics Today magazine, about the history of peer review. You can find a link in the show notes. The history of peer review is far shorter than even I realized. Much of the article supports my call for taking a close look at the process, but there are a few potential benefits that I had not previously considered. So I encourage you to check it out. And now, on with the show. This is the Nanovation Podcast, an exploration of big innovations emerging from small things. I'm Mike Filler, your host and a professor at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Enjoy the show. It is my pleasure to have Fred Rascoe back on the podcast. He is the scholarly communication librarian at Georgia Tech, among several hats that he wears. So welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming. Are you still the department liaison for aerospace engineering?
Yep, department liaison for aerospace engineering. Also doing lots of other various things. Teaching 1101 library orientation instruction, information literacy to GT 1000. There's just all kinds of things.
What is GT 1000 for those who don't know?
GT 1000 is the first year student orientation class, I'll call it, the freshman seminar that lots of different universities have. It's our version of it.
Right. I look forward to coming and guest lecturing.
Yes, and you're going to talk about failure.
I know it well.
Failure. So we're going to hit all the negative topics today. Failure.
Death.
Yeah. This is going to be great.
And you are still part of the Lost in the Stacks team?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Lost in the Stacks is the one and only research library rock and roll radio show.
Mm-hmm. Every Friday at noon on WREK Atlanta.
We will put a link in the show notes. Fred was here on episode 9. This will be episode 40-something for you, this
Holy
show.
Moly.
Yeah, we keep going, like the Energizer Bunny. And when he visited last time, we talked about the state of scholarly publishing. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to do a little bit of an update on what's happened in the last 2 years or so.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So why don't you start with like a recap?
Okay.
If you remember kind of what we talked about last time, maybe recapping that, and then what's new since last time.
I think when we were here last time together, we were talking a lot about scholarly piracy, I think. Is that right? We talked about...
as a symptom of
yes.
the system being kind of broken. But
right, yeah. Well, you mentioned like things that have been happening in the last 2 years. I mean, just in the last 2 days, things have gotten kind of exciting in the world of scholarly publishing.
As exciting as they can get.
As exciting as scholarly publishing gets, right? There just it might be 3 days ago now. The European Science Union has released I should say not the whole of European science, but 11 funding agencies that are part of the European Science Funding Coalition. They've released a document that they're calling Plan S, which is mandating by 2020 that the year 2020, anybody that gets funds from those European science funding agencies needs to publish open access. And that means
immediately.
That's immediately.
Right.
And that means not publish, these are the caveats that come with that plan, not publish with a journal that has mostly subscription access, but you can pay to have it open access if you want, which we call hybrid publishing,
right.
Or any publication that is subscription access only with, embargoes. You can make it open access in 1 year, 2 years, something like that.
Right, and that's really common right now.
Yes. This is publish it immediately, open access. Doesn't matter where, it just has to be immediately open access, and the publisher that you choose cannot have any option for subscription access, which means Science, the journal Science, is currently excluded. Mm-hmm. The journal Nature, I've heard estimates that like 85% of journals out there are not eligible under this plan.
I think we talked about this last time. It seems entirely obvious to me that this is where things will go.
Right.
Because taxpayers fund this.
Yes.
And why should taxpayers have to pay again
right.
to read something?
Right. The European agencies are funded by state,
right.
Not dollars, but euros. But here it is the primary, I guess the analogs to those European agencies, which are like the NSF, the National Science Foundation, and big federal organizations like that are funded by taxpayer dollars. Mm-hmm. And this is what we talked about last time. The research that is funded by taxpayer dollars is often not accessible to the taxpayer because it is limited by the publishers charging subscription fees.
And to be clear, when we say taxpayer, we mean both personal taxpayers, individuals, and corporations.
Yes.
Right? And both parties have interests in the scientific literature.
Right. Yes. This money from the NSF comes from the federal budget.
Right.
I guess in the case of this European plan, they're calling it Plan S because they're calling themselves Coalition S, and I can't remember what the S is for, but it's their code word for their secret plan.
Coalition Smarty-Pants. That's just
so the idea is that publishers funding agencies for a long time have, in the interest of academic freedom, which is very important to academics like yourself, have just funded research and said, okay, you do the research, publish it, where you will. And now funding agencies are starting to say, we're giving you, Dr. Mike Filler, this money. When you publish your research based on this money that we're giving you, please make it openly available.
Right.
Publishers, of course, have been, riding a gravy train of they take the work of authors in academia, and that is produced by virtue of being funded from these funding agencies, and they do the services like coordinate the peer review and things like that and make it available online for a fee. So it's essentially they're getting free labor, free product, free research that was funded by somewhere else, and they're putting it on their own publishing platforms and saying, here it is, libraries, hey, pay us a subscription to access this, or if you want to individually pay us money to access an article.
Right, and in the past, though, they served a bigger purpose, which was printing things and mailing things, right? That aspect of publishing was really expensive,
right,
and not something that every university wanted to do themselves, right? And you didn't want to have a printing press in the building across the street just to publish scholarly articles coming out of your university.
Right.
But then the internet disrupted all of this.
Yes.
Just like they disrupted most newspapers.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think we talked last time, why should scholarly publishing be any different?
Right. It's, as a matter of fact, I think it was Forbes magazine in an article 15, 20 years ago, predicted that academic publishing would be the first thing to be disrupted. Go? Yeah, to be disrupted by this new open online economy, and it's actually one of the last holdouts.
Yeah,
and I know you like predictions on this show. Like
they're always wrong.
Right. Yeah. So I want to jump in there and wallow around in being wrong, because I've always thought, especially when things like Sci-Hub started really getting popular attention a couple of years ago, I thought, and maybe a part of me still thinks this, that publishers would start to realize that they have this massive, massive quantity of digital material that people want access to, and it's going to make more sense to them to just make it open, and traffic comes to their website or their online platform or however, and they monetize things that way with driving traffic to their site.
Right.
I thought that is how piracy would make the publishers victorious in this ecosystem. It hasn't happened. Maybe it will happen. Maybe it's happening slowly. But I really thought that publishers would see this as a time to change business models.
So one of the business models I've thought of, and even brought up to an editor I was talking to at a conference once, was more curation, where, take a step back. I am more or less of the opinion that we should just get rid of peer review. That on the net of it is negative. In a perfect world, peer review would be great. All manuscripts would be improved.
Right.
All things that are not currently viewed in the mainstream would still get published, etc. But I think my sense from my own experience is that net it is a detraction. Also, how much time I have to spend responding to these comments, how much time I have to spend reviewing manuscripts of other people. Happy to do it as part of the system, but I think it's kind of 50-50. And so if we just got rid of it, what would happen? Like, I like playing that mind game a bit.
Right.
And just like we've gotten rid of a lot of newspapers, and there's been a lot of independent publishers now who've cropped up, small organizations, even individual bloggers. Many of them are outstanding. They don't need to be part of the New York Times to be outstanding.
Right.
Yeah. And so to me, that's kind of model could appear in academia. And then what I would love to see a group like Elsevier or Springer do is then curate and kind of analyze and look at what's interesting and what's not. Right, help people see this is all the stuff coming out. Use some expertise to kind of say, these are the top 10 papers from Georgia Tech this month.
Right.
Or the most interesting 10 papers.
Really taking a different approach to every publisher has a marketing department, but you're saying take a very different approach to a marketing department, and even on the individual paper level, not say we've got this journal and this journal, which is tops in the field. Right. You're saying, it's hey, this paper is out here and we are actively promoting it. And by actively promoting it, the return is people are driven to their website.
I guess I was even thinking subscriptions. So I was thinking more, there's this is it a law firm? Can't remember the name, something Burke, who is the maybe they're consultants or lobbyists that Georgia Tech uses in D.C. to kind of understand what's going on with the federal government and how it pertains to academia. Okay. And they send these reports, and I see them occasionally. Okay. And anyone on campus can more or less see them, telling you what's coming down the pike, how is it going to impact science, blah, blah, blah. So they're giving you insight into that world. And I'm wondering whether there is a business model where some group of science-minded people at an Elsevier or Springer can give insight into new things coming out in field X or field Y, and that you'd pay for the subscription for the insight as to what's going on.
Right. I can definitely see that happening. There's already moves by publishers that kind of signal that they're going into other areas. Like data management is a big, because these research publications are built on data that's collected, in whatever field. Mm-hmm. And increasingly, it is becoming important to be able to share that data. And so publishers are kind of moving into that, like, hey, we're sharing this. And I can see, like in your scenario, leveraging data sets across 100, 1,000 different publications. If they have someone on staff to synthesize that and present that as a, at the latest publishing conference, and say, hey, look what we found. This is what we can do for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds like a
hit on an interesting idea.
Something that we don't have today.
Right.
You need a certain amount of expertise, right? And there's flaws with that idea too, in terms of biases, but that's with anything. But I think there are a number of business models one could think about. I worry a bit about data management from a for-profit company.
Yeah.
I'd rather see like a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation kind of do data management versus, or an ACS or some kind of non-governmental, it could be governmental, but there's a lot of non-government funding of research.
Right.
But some nonprofit, kind of like Wikipedia in a way, right? Wikipedia's job.
Yeah.
I guess they're a nonprofit, I think.
Yeah, they regularly solicit donations, or they do to me when I log in.
Yeah, I get them too, right? So that kind of model, I feel, has more long-term stability than paying someone for data management.
It's going to be something like that in the future, because I think right now when we're looking at business models of publishing, a lot of what I see being talked about is moving from the library paying for the subscription, which in academia, that's how folks get access. The library is the university gives the library money. The library uses that money to pay for a subscription to a journal.
Right.
That's how it happens. And there's a lot of talk about moving from that to, well, the funder provides money for this research, and out of that funding that you get for research, you pay for 2 articles to be published, 5 articles to be published, whatever.
To this nonprofit.
Right. And that seems just as unsustainable to me in the long run. Or it doesn't reduce the cost any, for sure.
You don't think so? I mean, compared to the current model?
Well, I think it's got the good result that whatever research comes out of it is open access online. If the author is paying, then that means that the article at the end is open access, and no one ever has to pay to access it. But the money going into it, whether it's like a chunk, the library spends $1 million for this specific publisher to have access to all these journals. The publishers are still getting that money just like a different way. And I guess you could look at it, well, if the end result is open access, then okay, we're just spending that money a different way. But it seems, I keep hanging on to that idea that if publishers just decided, we're going to make all our stuff, we're going to stop charging for subscription access, and we're going to make our money based on other models, because as we drive traffic to what we've got,
right?
That it seems like it would make more sense. Now, I'll give the caveat: I don't hear a lot of people saying that. Yeah, a lot of people smarter than me not saying that. So,
I really worry about advertising-driven business models, just because you can then really skew who comes to see what based on ads.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily talking about ads. I just mean, like, we were talking about cancer research, medical research off mic earlier. Medical research, that's a pretty good model in place there. The NIH, yes, thank you, has mandated public access, and that has worked fairly well, with PubMed.
Right. The thing that gets me is just how little putting an article online seems, in my mind, to cost. How much it should cost.
Right.
I mean, I do all the work, my students and I do all the work anyway to more or less format these things. We have modern desktop publishing tools.
Right.
Right. I don't need a paper to look all fancy for it to look professional enough and have professional enough figures made by the author.
Right.
Honestly, I prefer double-spaced articles to double-column, single-spaced articles just because it's easier to read and take notes. And to me, I'm doing that work anyway, and the cost of another byte of data is so small.
Right.
Now, the peer review, if we keep that system, that costs money.
Right.
But
someone
in
has
the
to
absence
coordinate
of that, I just don't see how it costs nearly as much money as it does today.
It doesn't, but the value is there, and I think this is the point that I was trying to remember a minute ago. The content is there. It's negligible cost to share it, but it is valuable because people want to act. There's data there that people want to access, and so if publishers have, it's not necessarily that ads are driving. Not necessarily that it has to be ads driving the site, but there's content there that is driving people to the website. They're getting it for free. And publishers, rather than, you want to learn about this nanotechnology material or something, pay $35 for an article. Rather than that, it's like, here's the article. I happen to know your IP address for coming here, and maybe I have some sort of thing that you log in or become part of a social network on this publishing site, or something along those lines. Something that, like in every other, search engines, news, everything that we do, looking at videos online, we give information about ourselves, and that is what is. I'm not saying that is ideal.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would argue against it.
I'm saying that I don't understand why publishers haven't done, why they've really maintained the traditional, I give you this thing and you give me $35.
Right.
No, I don't mean to argue that that's the preferable way.
Right.
I'm just...
there's alternative ways to do it.
Right.
And it doesn't seem like anyone's tried.
Right. Yeah.
It reminds me a bit of music before iTunes came.
Right.
I mean, we might have talked about this last time, but there was all this piracy because it was hard to get CDs, and they wanted to sell you the whole CD. Right. And people wanted one song, and then Apple came along and said, no, we'll just sell every song for 99 cents.
Right.
And is there no piracy now? No. There's still plenty of piracy. But did it give the average person an avenue to get what they wanted for a reasonable price? And yes. And did they do it? Yes.
Right.
And did it entirely change how the music industry works? Yes.
And it's changing again. I mean, no one pays 99 cents for a song anymore. That is industry. The iTunes thing is in decline.
Exactly.
Of course, there's Spotify and Pandora, but you know what the largest music streaming service is YouTube.
Right. So this podcast you can get on YouTube, actually, for those who are YouTube-only kind of people.
Right. Music streaming and lots of other valuable content.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I think in a bit it gets back to this point you made about the Forbes article saying, well, it's got to be academic publishing first.
Right.
And then it brings up the question about why hasn't it been?
That is a question that a lot of people are trying to answer. It seems so obvious. It seems obvious now because the people producing the content don't want to get paid. Libraries obviously don't want to pay millions of dollars in subscriptions. Professional societies want to maintain, professional societies often publish these journals, and they want to maintain themselves, but they're more interested in promoting their scholarship. They would certainly rather fund themselves otherwise, I think.
Yeah, I wonder if it's just kind of a disconnect to who makes decisions about access to journals and who's publishing in journals. Right there, I think about the newspaper case. You paid for the newspaper, right? So you saw that there were other avenues to get more or less the same content online, so you weren't going to continue to pay for it. It may be something similar here, that it was someone else paying for it, and it wasn't the individual who was bearing the cost. right? There is a disconnect there.
Right.
If I had to pay out of my own lab's money for research articles, I would be much more upset at the cost of the research articles.
Right.
Right. But there's this gap between me and what I need, and then who pays for it, university.
You could say it's that the lack of open access is maybe a moral problem, or it's the right thing to do. But when you get down to it, when you actually ask academics, what are your challenges in finding published academic literature? And they'll say, I don't really have a lot of challenges, because they are, and this is a United States and Western Hemisphere and academic
problem, right.
Academic institution problem, or mindset, I should say. So I want to, make sure I put that caveat out there. But in the United States academic environment, you ask the professors, like, are you having trouble finding, what it is that you need? It's a lot of times it's like, no, I'm finding it fine.
So let's segue into the work you're doing, trying to study things like this.
Yeah.
You summarize what you're doing in this space, and then we can connect it to this discussion. Right.
Yeah. Actually, that's what I was thinking of. I'm part of a research team funded by this organization called Ithaca SNR. They recruited librarians at schools that had civil engineering, like very good or high ranking civil engineering departments.
Are they somehow connected to civil engineering?
No, they are a nonprofit organization that studies how libraries work, how scholarly communications work, roughly.
Okay.
And they've done a lot of studies on different academic disciplines, and they how do agricultural scientists share their work? How do they find their the research that they want? How do religious studies faculty do that? Well, they wanted to do civil engineering, and so myself and Alicia Lee, who is also here at the Georgia Tech Library, we were the Georgia Tech representatives who were going around to civil engineers to ask questions like, what do you do with your research data? How do you curate it? How do you find the publications that you need as part of your research? How do you publish yourself, and what challenges do you have when publishing? We ask questions like that.
And for this discussion, I'm going to assume it's generally extendable to other disciplines.
Yes.
I mean, I've seen differences like on Twitter. There's very few engineers, although that's changing, who are on Twitter. A lot of chemists on Twitter. So I find that there are differences between the disciplines.
Right.
But for purposes of this discussion, I'm going to generally assume that most academics fall within this space you're talking about.
Right. Well, I mean, you're not in civil engineering, you're nanotechnology engineer.
So you can ask me the same questions, and let's find out.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, let me pull up my interview.
Oh, great.
Guide here.
And then I'll answer, and then you'll kind of say where I fall relative to what you've seen so far.
Let's do that.
Okay.
What kind of published information do you rely on to do your research?
So papers, textbooks, sometimes property databases.
Property databases?
Yeah.
What, material properties?
Chemical properties.
Okay.
Like a classic one is the NIST web book.
Okay.
So the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST, has this great web book which you go in, you type in the molecule, and they show you all the data they have on it.
Okay, right.
It's a pretty great resource. So, yeah, those are the kinds of things.
And how do you find this information?
Pretty much 100% online.
Okay, where do you start online?
Oh, I mean, some of these things I know about. I'll sometimes go to the Georgia Tech Library website to look for something. Sometimes I'll just go to Google Scholar, Web of Knowledge.
Okay.
I for whatever reason, I'm still skeptical of Google Scholar.
Okay.
I'm not sure why I am. And I feel like Web of Knowledge is a little less manipulated, but I have no real reason to think that the Google Scholar things are manipulated in any way.
Okay. Is it just like a distrust of Google as an entity?
I grew up in a world where Google Scholar did not exist.
Where do you typically publish your research?
Yeah, in ACS journals. the American Chemical Society.
These are peer-reviewed
journals. Yeah.
Right. Okay. What are your key considerations in deciding to publish there?
In those journals?
Yes.
Well, quality.
How do you define quality?
I think there's a couple tiers of journals. There's top tier journals, which are probably it depends how you view the world, but some people would say Science and Nature are also glam journals. But for now, we can call those the top tier journals. Then you have journals in my field, like the Journal of the American Chemical Society, JACS, or Nanoletters, specifically for nanotechnology. Those are second tier, but really great journals.
Right.
And then there's kind of third tier journals, which are, say, solid, but the results aren't quite as interesting as something you might publish in Nanoletters or JACS. Mm-hmm. And then there's the throwaway journals.
Okay.
And those are
what is a throwaway?
Nothing really came out of this work, but because my job depends on me publishing, I'm going to put something into one of these journals.
Okay.
So someone can
tier
count
1,
this
2, 3, and then a throwaway category. Yeah. Okay. Have you ever made your scholarly publications available through open access?
No, because it costs money.
Okay.
In a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I think it's a great thing to do,
mm-hmm.
right, today it costs money.
Mm-hmm.
And my community does not recognize things like Archive.
Archive, the preprint server.
The preprint server, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe most people who put things on Archive then go and publish it in a peer-reviewed journal.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not something I feel like I personally right now want to spend money on.
Right, and the free the Archive or a repository or something, you
doesn't quite count.
Right,
because it's not peer reviewed,
and it's extra effort to do the thing that doesn't count.
It's it's extra money to do the thing I don't have money for.
It's extra money to get it published in an open access journal, or something free like Archive. It's extra effort, and it doesn't count because you have
not so much extra effort. I think you just post it. I don't think it's that tough, but it doesn't really count for much in my community.
Okay.
So it's why do it at that point?
Right. So getting it out there and accessible, even if it's only a quick upload process, is still not as valuable as the effort that you put to do the tier 1, 2, 3.
Right. There's only a certain number of hours in the day, so I might as well focus on the thing that gets me towards where I need to be.
Okay. So you're right in line with what I'm finding in civil engineering.
I love being average.
We didn't interview the whole department. It was a qualitative survey. So we got, I think, 11 responses. We spent an hour with 11 faculty members to get, ask in-depth versions of those kinds of questions. But it seems like people are aware of the library resources, but they definitely like to start with Google or Google Scholar. Mm-hmm. They know about open access, but are either just not interested because they've got their no one said tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and throwaway. Okay. But they had their own well, this is the quality thing in my field, and that's where all my colleagues publish. Right. This is what will be respected.
Right.
It's and if they're aware, a few were aware of things like Archive or our own repository here, but they just said that's not where my interest lies.
If when I got an NSF grant funded, for example, or a DOE grant, whatever, if I got a grant mm-hmm. funded and there was specifically money for publishing in open access journals, I would certainly do it.
Mm-hmm.
But usually the response is, you budgeted this much. I want to fund you, but I can't give you this much. So I'm going to cut your budget by 20%. Make it work.
Right.
So the last thing I'm going to do is then say, well, I'm going to spend extra money
mm-hmm.
publishing somewhere where I personally, out of my own lab's budget, have to pay.
So if the NSF, you get funding from the NSF. So if the NSF came down with a mandate like these European institutions and said, starting in the year 2020, you cannot publish in a journal that charges for access to the articles, what would be your response?
It's a great question. I would say, okay, sure. Now give me some money.
Right.
To do open access. Or implement systems
mm-hmm.
on an NSF server where all NSF-funded research gets stored.
Right.
Right. That's free to me as the person funded by NSF.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. Why not? I think there's ways to handle this. I think it'd be really weird if the funding agencies all said, we're going to do this, and you have to publish open access, but we're not going to give you any money, and we're not going to provide a server for you to use. Figure it out.
Which is why I don't know if this European thing is a done deal or not.
Right.
Because certainly, no one I've ever met has been really against open access, but it's the logistical challenge of it. If you say sure, give me money to do it and I'll do it, fine. But no one has that kind of it costs $3,000 to publish in some Elsevier journals.
And I think there is. Do you want open access with peer review or without peer review? And I don't think scientists question the assumption that peer review is essential to science enough. I think it's generally thought of as gospel, that peer review is what makes science what it is. And I disagree with that. In the good times, like I was saying, it is helpful. It improves things. In bad times, it certainly is an impediment to publishing, even when I think it's a sufficiently solid piece of work. And I think most scientists would say they've had that happen to them at some point in their career. But we no longer... I go back and I think about the newspaper world again, and I think, well, why do we have an editor of a newspaper? Well, really, when it came down to it, they had to decide on any given day what articles were going to go into the newspaper, because you could only print so many pages per day.
Right.
You were limited in space and cost, right?
Yep.
So they have an editor to make decisions like that. But with the internet, where the marginal cost of an extra paper is effectively $0 once the server is set up, does that still make sense?
Right.
Because you're not limited in the same way you used to be limited. And so I feel like it's worth questioning things we think we hold dear.
How does it affect the cost of peer review then?
Well, that's my point. Just going to open access, you still need to pay money to coordinate peer review.
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Right. And so that's why if you want to publish in Nature Communications, it's a couple $1,000. It's that, plus they really make the papers look nice. Yeah. I could do without the real nice looking papers. I don't really care.
It's not $1,000 worth of formatting per paper, right?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes they do take the figures and work with the authors to clean them up and make them clearer. Okay. So in that case, that's a service that they provide. I think you're paying for it. Not the ACS journals generally don't do that kind of thing.
Okay.
Right? You make your own figures. We will coordinate the peer review. That costs money. Right? We're still a nonprofit, but it costs money. My point is going open access with and without peer review are separate things. And that if you didn't have peer review and it became acceptable to publish things on archive, which is effectively open access without peer review.
Right. So
then
maybe
that would be fine.
The archive model could start to be that's the finished product. You just start to say, hey, this is it. This is what I give to the world.
Right. And my contention is that people who are good scientists and engineers would write good papers, take the time, dot the I's, cross the T's, and they don't need the peer review process to convince them they should be doing that.
I'll tell you, that would change a lot about library instruction, because librarians have really spread that gospel of peer review. Whenever we go to classes and say, you know, hey, these are the library resources, one of the first things we always say is hey, you can trust these because these are all peer-reviewed journals. Ha, ha, ha.
Well, and it's a bit disingenuous, right? And I think academics are disingenuous when they say that peer review always is a helpful thing.
Right.
I think there are plenty of cases. I've experienced it, I think, on my own papers. I've seen as part of a review team where I'm one peer reviewer of a group that was reviewing a manuscript, and I like this, by the way, when a decision has been made on a manuscript, whether to publish or request revisions or reject, that all of the peer reviewers see all of the other peer reviewers' comments.
Okay.
So I've seen this enough now where I've seen other peer reviewers, laud a paper where I found serious flaws, and you may argue, well, maybe you didn't find the the right flaws or they weren't flaws, but these are also where I've seen situations where they've taken data from previous papers and put them in the newer paper claiming it was new, and the other peer reviewer lauded it, and it was very clear, and I pointed this out, of course, that this is basically a simple thing that was already published by the same group. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that the person who lauded it was being nefarious, but maybe lack of time, lack of attention to detail, boom, there you go. And so all these factors to me lead me to think, well, it's about 50-50. So if it's ever 50-50, you probably should just not worry about it.
You might as well just do a coin toss.
Exactly.
You get the same result on average.
I wish I had data that supported that.
You could start flipping some coins.
I say that because I feel like I have enough anecdotal evidence that peer review is certainly not perfect. It's certainly time-consuming, both for the author, both for the peer reviewers, for the editors. And if I think about all the time I might get back not having to participate in the peer review process, but just focus on writing the best manuscript I can write, my thinking is the net benefit would be better than having to deal with peer review. And again, because we're not worrying about the amount of space in a journal that's going to get sent in the mail every month or every week, and the cost of printing it, the cost of shipping it, because it's free effectively for one additional article or byte or however you view it, it's fine.
In the nanotechnology engineering world, do you have allies, or are you leading this revolution alone?
It's not a revolution, just to be very clear about it. It's me talking in a room.
It's an exchange of ideas, the free exchange of ideas.
Right. No, I've mentioned it to a few people, and when I mention it, they generally say, "Oh, I had not thought to question the gospel of peer review." And I think when they do, they don't think it's the worst idea in the world. The one thing that comes back to me a lot is, well, then we're going to have a bunch of bad papers in the literature, just like we have a bunch of horrendous blogs with cat pictures on the internet when there's no gatekeepers. And you will, but I would argue that that's not a big deal. And again...
How different is that from the current situation?
Well, okay, right. That's exactly... Now that every publisher has a gajillion new journals in the last 10 years where anything can be published, no one may read it, but it'll get published. And I guess the danger is a really bad thing getting read by somebody and kind of steering them in a really negative direction. But there are so many journals now, it's effectively like what I'm proposing. You can get anything published. That was not the case 10 or 20 years ago.
You know what you're really arguing for here is you are arguing for a total revamp of how faculty promotion and tenure works.
Well, maybe I am. Yeah, and this is not something I mentioned pre-tenure.
Right.
I kept this to myself.
Right.
And what did I do before tenure? I did everything people told me I should do.
Yep.
Like not a podcast.
Right.
Like I'm still surprised at how people view this with a wary eye. Even though what my job is supposed to be is to educate and teach and do all these kinds of things. And so this to me plays right into that.
Like Georgia Tech's mission is to bring what we do here out to the community.
Yeah.
And this is an avenue to do that.
That's what I think. And I think it promotes discussion, right? And not only just dissemination, but people hearing the exchange of ideas, talking about the gray areas, things that aren't black and white because nothing is. It's mostly gray. And that a podcast gives you an opportunity to do that, whether it's about publishing or science or what have you. And so I really value the medium for its educational capability that you don't get in other media. But still, why hasn't academia done open access quicker? Well, it's probably the same reason they look at podcasting with a wary eye. It's like, it's just different. It's just different.
I think you got it.
In the remaining minutes, I wanted to come back and touch base on the new library building on campus.
Oh, sure.
And kind of maybe talk about, because I don't think we ever talked about on the podcast what it is. And then I think that the meta question here is, and we've touched on it a bit today, is what is a library in the age of the internet?
Right. And we are asking ourselves that question every day. I mean, we've got ideas. We know what we think it's going to be, but one of the nice things about how we're doing things at the library now is we're kind of doing it with an eye of, okay, we're going to try new services with a mindset of, if they don't work, we're going to try something else. There's
experimentation.
Yeah. The whole idea of the space that's being renovated, the architectural philosophy for the interior was long life, loose fit, which means if you are doing something in some part of the building and you decide it needs changing, it's not going to be, a major renovation to take sledgehammers out and totally redo it all again. We can just adapt this building to do.
It sounds like something someone got in a fortune cookie, by the way.
Long life, loose fit. Lottery numbers 12, 24.
Exactly.
So the library construction, I guess, has been going on for 2 years now. I haven't even had an office in the library since May of 2016, which might have been around the time that we spoke last time.
So. Yeah.
So it's been over 2 years, but we're supposed to move back into the finished tower portion of the building in January, and then there's a smaller part of the building called the Price Gilbert side that's only 4 stories high. Then that'll be renovated, and the whole thing is supposed to be done in the year 2020.
Okay.
So yeah, that's when we move back in and have
many
everything.
Fewer books, right?
Almost no books, and they are already gone. Not gone, but not on site.
They were not burned.
They were not. Yeah, we did not. Burn them. They're in a storage facility that we share with Emory University. They are still in our library catalog. You type them in and you see it. You request it. It gets delivered from the storage facility. But the space inside the library is not going to be used for book storage. It's going to be used for things like the data visualization laboratory, which we've got a pilot going now, and it's going to move into a permanent space in the new library. A lot of multimedia stations. There's going to be a place where you can record podcasts. So if you ever get tired of doing it in your office here, maybe...
It's quite a nice space, I thought.
It is, and you've got a nice view out the window here, too. So, but, if, say, one of your grad students wanted to start one.
Right.
So, yeah, the space is going to be used for things like... There's going to be an area for graduate students only to study. There's... going to be Retrotech is going to have a new space, and Retrotech is antique, I'll say that in quotes, antique computers, things that are more than 10 years old, but also going back, like 20, 30 years. Okay. So if you're
doing... that's on display or
no,
for use?
They're using them because, hey, say a faculty member opens up an old file cabinet I remember all these 3.5-inch floppy drives. I sure need that data now. Well, bring it to Retrotech and we'll do some digital forensics on that.
Oh, that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
So. It reminds me of this at Stanford in the Gates building. There is, if it's still there, I'm not sure it's still there, there is one of the early hard drives, which is like 8 feet across, like a big 8-foot record.
Yeah.
Right, one of the platters, and on display in this glass case. And they have these, things like you would have at a museum pointing out different parts on the platter where like hard drive crash of 1972, and it's like just like needle like ripped a hole in the side of this 8-foot thing. Speaking of Retrotech, we've come a long way.
But that's what a library is. That's our idea of a library now. It's a place for knowledge creation, knowledge dissemination, not a warehouse for books any longer.
And that's a huge shift. I feel like it's a huge shift for a campus because campus is built up around libraries, right?
Right.
That's where the knowledge was.
Traditionally, it's like been the soul of the or the heart of the campus.
That's where the knowledge was.
Right.
And now it's not localized anymore.
Increasingly, it's not. And, this gets back to publishing. If open access becomes a reality, what is the library's role in curating journal articles? Because somebody else funds it, somebody else writes it, someone else puts it online. under the old system, the library,
Right.
had to gather all that information together and make it available so that anyone on campus could use it.
Right.
But if the library is not part of that, triangle,
Right.
then it's just out there in the internet. What's our role?
It may be even more meta than that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is a campus? Right. Is because it's not just knowledge that's going online, learning,
Right.
and there is certainly benefit face-to-face interaction, things
Yeah.
like that. My sense is we're going to get even better at that through virtual reality and things. And
Georgia Tech has already, with its online graduate programs, has
Right.
massively increased its graduate student population.
Yeah, enrollment.
Yeah.
It's been very disruptive. I was just talking to someone the other day about how disruptive this has been to the College of Computing, because that's so far the big program that's
Right.
been very successful.
Mm-hmm.
It's the master's program. But exactly this, right? So there's a broader. This is another podcast. We had to think about who we could bring on and have a library learning discussion, like where we do both with a third guest, because I think there is this meta question. If the library was where was the center of the university in the past, but this is where the knowledge was, and now it's been its role is changing and been disconnected from some of its previous activities, like you were pointing out. How does that affect learning, and what's going on with learning, where learning doesn't have to happen in one place
Right.
at one time because the professor was the only one with the knowledge?
Right.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of meta stuff that can be unpacked here.
Yeah. If we figure it out, we've solved higher education.
Yeah, so either you're really depressed right now or you're really optimistic that there's a lot of exciting things for the future.
Well, we've started with failure and death, so let's land on optimism.
Let's do that. Thank you, Fred, for coming back on the podcast.
Thanks, I enjoyed it.
You've been listening to Nanovation. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a rating or write a review on Apple Podcasts. Show notes are available at fillerlab.com/nanovation. Nanovation is recorded in the Marcus Nanotechnology Building on the campus of Georgia Tech. Andrew Cannon edits the show. I'm Mike Filler. See you next time.